Certainly in terms of weaponry, ESPN is the superpower. The constraint that ESPN has, somewhat ironically, given that they've got ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN Classic, ESPN College, ESPN News, is they may be foreclosed pursuing a particular product based upon shelf space limitations. So you know, it may be that NBC Sports Network becomes the de facto home of the NHL by virtue of the fact that with the NBA and with Major League Baseball, it isn't something that ESPN could really accommodate. That I think is sort of the most important point that people should take away. I mean, if ESPN really wants something, not only can they afford to get it, but they have the kind of platforms, the ones that Jeff was speaking about, that put them in a unique position to be able to exploit that, which means both being able to capture additional revenue that maybe their competitors can't, and also offer various things to sports organizations. And that's sort of where I come from. I mean, I look at these organizations and say, you know, yes, the check and the exposure are very important and we need that, but what else can you do for us that will really transform our business? And ESPN is in the position to be able to do more of those sorts of things.
Ed, when you end up seeing a bunch of entrepreneurs in this space and a bunch of companies in the sports space largely, who are two or three of the most interesting and forward-looking entrepreneurs out there right now? Why would you call them out in the sports arena? What are they doing that's interesting?
Well, I think I would first mention Mark Cuban, just because he's sort of an interesting sports brand in and of himself. He's morphed into you know, the business guy on the reality shows, and is sort of seen everywhere in every pursuit of a team. And you know, he's colorful and interesting. He happens to be a really smart guy and fun to hang out with. He certainly has taken the mantle. I'm going to think about the second that I'd mentioned. He's the first that comes to mind.
He's the first that comes right away. So Jeff, talk about the digital monetization opportunity in the sports arena. Who's done it well, and what's the opportunity going forward across platforms like Twitter and even newer things like Pinterest?
From an institutional basis, I think that among the guys who've done it the best right now are Major League Baseball. They were aggressive, and I mean, they failed loudly and publicly during some of their more ambitious early efforts to bring a really kind of big, aggressive digital play to what they do. But their at-bat applications and programs that allow fans to basically watch games with the exception of kind of local blackout rules across the country on any device at any time is a phenomenal product. They got in front of the secondary ticketing market in a really intelligent way by doing a deal with StubHub, and basically just ignored the fact that there were all these kind of Byzantine and weird secondary, you know, ticket laws that were cut across. They just kind of ignored them. That's what it felt like, right? I mean, you were at the league, and every municipality had a different kind of set of restrictions. I mean, the old days, right? If you wanted to scalp tickets legally, you went to a broker in Jersey, kind of thing. And they just, you know, so they've fully embraced a product like StubHub.
But it's interesting. It's another one of the examples you're talking about where, in some ways, it feels like sports went first. When I think about Airbnb and a lot of the other kind of successful digital companies today, some of those are at least a little bit reminiscent of what you're talking about with trading tickets or trading secondary shares in these.
Exactly, and they fill this, you know, they fill these phenomenal needs that really, you know, these products work because they serve folks' interests, right? They serve whether it be season ticket holders who can't attend every game, or fans who wanted transparency in a secondary ticket marketing was driven, you know, were concerned by getting ripped off either by a fake ticket or a stupid price, whatever. And it was one of the simple things by just, you know, creating a market, you know, created a great product. So I think, you know, baseball in particular has done a phenomenal job of kind of managing this stuff.
And I'm still surprised when you read some of or listen to John Skipper, he will not only talk about the success they're having in cable and the success that they're having digitally, but he'll also still bring up radio, which very few media companies, it feels like, talk about in that kind of aggressive and confident way. He'll bring up print as part of the conversation. talk about sports' ability to succeed in what are otherwise perceived as kind of dying arenas.
Well, I mean, Skipper comes from ESPN, the magazine, and so his roots run deep there.
He's eating home cooking.
So it's understandable that he'd be anxious to promote that. But I think their strategy is pretty simple. It's be everywhere that sports fans are. And that goes not only to magazines and radio and online, but also, many remember the ESPN Zone restaurants. There still is one here, though they've shuttered them in some other places. It's a sort of a cultural phenomenon that they want to do word association with. And if you think ESPN, you think about sports, you think ESPN. And that's what they're really trying, I think, ultimately to cement.
Jeff, I've got one more question for you, then I'm going to turn to the audience for a couple questions before we tune in. Or I won't. I'll turn to you for the final question because we're running short on time. So look forward for us. Tell me about 2 or 3 interesting people, trends, things that are going to happen over the next 5 years in sports that folks in Hollywood might find interesting.
It's a great question. I think the one that has the greatest potential for being a real changer is the way that sports and technology and gambling are likely to evolve. I think what was the more this horrible Monday Night Football call a couple weeks ago that forced the NFL to reconcile with their locked out referees. The byproduct of that was it affected something in the neighborhood of $150 to $200 million worth of action on that game that night. And I believe that as you continue to see governmental agencies across the country, governmental municipalities across the country struggling, right, with just basic budgets and work, the ability to somehow channel this huge amount of untapped interest in sports gambling and what can be done online, I think is going to be something that will start to play itself out.
Interesting. It'll be the new lottery for depressed state legislators.
It has the potential to be enormous. Now, people have been saying that for a long. It's like Brazil's the next big country, right? Everybody's been saying this for a long time. But I think there will be some really strong market forces that'll make it harder and harder to resist. And once somebody breaks ranks on that, I think others will follow.
Ed, I'm going to give you the final soundbite. Help us look ahead. They used to talk about futurists in the late 70s, early 80s. Alvin Toffler, if you remember that, be a futurist today and tell us about something we should look ahead, someone or something that we should be paying attention to.
Well, I think there are a couple things that I think about a lot. I mean, one is kind of the core business model that is fueling the run-up of sports value. I mean, the marketplace has changed and sort of unleashed the power that was already there, but the constraints of the marketplace didn't really allow for it to be fully realized. So we're now seeing, with the changes, the opportunity for whether it's teams or leagues to be in the business of being producers, distributors, be the content, sell the ancillaries, do real estate development,
It's interesting.
what have
Sports
you.
teams as the new studios.
Well, in a
new
way
studio.
they have been, but they've never really thought of themselves that way. And I think the maybe for this audience, the interesting thing to think about is, I was always very interested in the whole, series of windows that people in this room are very familiar with. And it doesn't really exist in sports because the value of sports is really almost entirely real time. In fact, we heard a reflection of that a little earlier this morning. And I think as we look down the road at our whole world becoming faster and faster, that the notion of the traditional windows, I mean, there are pressures already placed on those things. But I think there may be an opportunity to look at sports for how sports goes about slicing and dicing its rights in order to maximize the value. There's greater exclusivity in sports than there tends to be in entertainment, but there may be a window to look through and peer into the future to see what happens when maybe everyone is demanding all 12 of those episodes instantaneously, et cetera, because that is pretty much, I mean, that's what NBA League Pass and what, you know, Sunday Ticket are. You know, you get all the episodes, you don't just get the one that's designated for your market.